I've replayed that night in my head 1,000 times, trying to pinpoint the moment when the fight tipped into something else. Arguments were not unusual for us. Two stubborn people learning how to share a life inevitably collide, but usually they ended in familiar ways. Sulking silence, then the slow truce of shared chores or a movie we didn't really watch. This one began, like many did, in the kitchen. She was at the sink rinsing lettuce for a salad neither of us really wanted. I was half distracted by an email on my laptop about deadlines I was already late for. The sound of water against metal mixed with the hum of the fridge. It was a soundtrack of ordinary domesticity until she said, "You didn't come home when you said you would." Again, I sighed before I even answered, which was mistake number one. "It was traffic," I said. "What do you want me to do, teleport?" She turned, lettuce dripping in her hands, and said, "I want you to care enough to plan better, to text, to notice I'm waiting." We had spoken these lines before. They were like a script neither of us wanted but both had memorized. I muttered something defensive. She snapped back. And just like that, we were sparring, trading sharp sentences like fencers who had practiced too much. It escalated quickly. She accused me of caring more about work than about us. I accused her of making me feel like nothing I did was enough. Our voices rose, filling the apartment until the walls seemed to lean inward, listening. At one point, I slammed my palm against the counter, not hard enough to break anything, but enough to make the plates rattle. She flinched. The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. And then, in the middle of my half-finished sentence, something about how I couldn't read her mind. She cut across me with words that didn't fit the script at all. "I'm done." Just that. 2 words. No volume, no theatrics. Flat, steady, like a judge stamping a file. It was so unlike her usual fiery rebuttals that for a second I didn't understand. I thought she meant "I'm done arguing," or "I'm done with tonight." But the way she dropped the lettuce into the sink, water splashing up like punctuation, told me she meant more. I stared at her, the air suddenly too heavy in my chest. "What do you mean?" I asked, but my voice cracked, betraying the panic starting to crawl up my ribs. She dried her hands on a towel with infuriating calm. "I mean, I can't do this anymore. The waiting, the fighting, the pretending that this is just a rough patch, when really it feels like our whole map has been redrawn and I don't know how to read it." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my body needed an outlet. "You're saying this now. Over lettuce." Her eyes softened for a flicker and then hardened again. "It's never about lettuce. And you know it." The clock on the wall ticked loudly, as if keeping score. My laptop pinged with another email, irrelevant and absurd in its timing. I tried to backpedal. "We're just stressed. We'll talk it through. We always do." But she shook her head slowly. "That's the problem. We don't talk it through. We talk around it. We fight in circles. And then we collapse into bed pretending it's fixed. I don't want to live in circles anymore." Her words carved something out of me. I suddenly felt like a man standing on ice that was cracking in every direction. I wanted to grab her, shake her, plead with her, but I also knew that anything too desperate would only prove her point. I settled on the one thing I could say. "I don't want you to be done." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she turned away, poured herself a glass of water, and said, "Wanting isn't enough anymore." The next morning was brutal in its normalcy. She made coffee. I buttered toast. We moved around each other like actors in a play we hadn't rehearsed, but knew well enough to fake. I tried to bring it up gently. "About last night." She cut me off. I meant it. I stared at the countertop, tracing a crumb with my finger. "So that's it. 3 years together, and you're calling it quits because we fight." Her voice softened, but not with mercy. "Not because we fight, because we don't change." Work that day was a blur. I sat in meetings nodding at things I didn't hear. My phone buzzed with her name once around noon. A single text, "I'll be late tonight." No heart emoji, no explanation. I went home to an apartment that felt suddenly too large. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her jacket wasn't on the hook. I wandered the rooms like a stranger visiting a crime scene after the evidence had been cleared. When she finally came in, it was past 9. She carried a small overnight bag. "I'm staying at Mia's for a while," she said simply. The words gutted me. "You're leaving?" "I need space." She didn't look angry. She looked exhausted. That scared me more. Anger can be fought with apologies. Exhaustion is a wall no ladder can scale. I asked if this was permanent. She said, "I don't know." I asked if she still loved me. She hesitated just long enough for the answer to sting. "Love isn't the question right now," she said. The door clicked behind her, and the sound was louder than any slam. I didn't sleep that night. At 3 a.m., I sat on the couch, scrolling through old photos. The trip to the mountains, the birthday surprise with balloons, the blurry selfie from our first concert. Each one felt like a receipt from a store that no longer existed. The next week blurred. She texted occasionally, practical things about bills or picking up mail. Nothing about us. I tried calling twice. Both went to voicemail. On Thursday, I passed a cafe near her office and saw her through the window, laughing with Mia. Relief and jealousy punched me at once. She looked light, unburdened, like the word "done" had freed her. That night I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed, "What do I need to change if I want her back?" The list grew long and desperate. Less work, more listening, therapy, patience. Then I stared at the list and realized it wasn't just about winning her back. It was about becoming someone I could respect again. 2 weeks later, she agreed to meet. Neutral ground, a park bench near the river. The kind of place where people break up because the open air can absorb what walls cannot. She arrived in a blue sweater I'd always loved. She sat, folded her hands, and said, "I don't hate you." "Good start." I tried to joke. It fell flat. She looked at the water as if reading answers there. "I don't hate you, but I don't recognize us anymore." I told her about my list, about the therapy appointment I'd booked, about the nights I'd spent interrogating myself. She listened, really listened. And then she said, "I believe you want to change, but I don't know if I want to wait while you figure out how." I asked if she was seeing someone else. She shook her head quickly. "This isn't about someone else. It's about me not wanting to feel invisible in my own relationship." Her words stung because they were true. How many times had I checked my phone mid-conversation? How many dinners had I half ruined with complaints about deadlines? I told her I could do better. She said, "I don't want promises. I want proof." We sat in silence, the kind that feels like a third person on the bench. She stood finally. "I'm not closing the door," she said, "but I'm not walking back through it either. Not yet." When she left, I stayed on the bench until the sky went purple. I realized the hardest part wasn't losing her. It was losing the version of myself I had been with her. The man who once showed up with flowers just because it was Tuesday, who once carried wine up 8 flights of stairs because elevators were broken. That man had gone missing long before she did. Months passed. We met a few more times. Coffee here, dinner there. Each time I felt hope flicker, then fade. She was polite, kind even, but distant. Like a teacher grading homework from a student who kept promising to try harder next semester. One evening, she came by the apartment to pick up some things she'd left. A stack of books, a sweater, the plant she swore could survive anything. She stood in the doorway, bag in hand, and said, "I think I really am done now." I wanted to argue, to beg, to remind her of every good memory we had. Instead, I just asked, "Is there anything I can say to change your mind?" She shook her head. It's not about words anymore. The finality in her tone left no room for debate. She hugged me briefly, one of those polite, almost formal hugs people give acquaintances. Then she walked away. The apartment was quieter than ever, but for the first time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like instruction, a demand to rebuild. I started running in the mornings, not to chase anything, but to learn how it feels to move forward without permission. I went to therapy regularly. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I cooked dinners I actually sat down to enjoy, even if the other chair stayed empty. I still thought of her often, but the sting softened into something almost tender. Gratitude, maybe, for the years we had, even if they ended in the kitchen with lettuce dripping in the sink. When people ask me now what happened, I tell them the truth. She said, "I'm done," in the middle of our fight, and I never expected it. But sometimes the most ordinary sentences are the ones that redraw your entire life. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more.